Welcome back to the Stephen A. Smith Show. Before I get on out of here, I had to talk about a story that's very, very important. And albeit indirectly, it involves Caitlin.
What happens when the most important athlete in a generation is told she's not good enough? Not by the fans, not by the stats, but by the very people who run the game? This isn't a hypothetical. This is exactly what just went down in the world of basketball, and the shockwaves are threatening to fracture an entire sport. We're talking about a decision so baffling, so financially reckless, and so dripping with personal politics that it's forced us to ask one brutal question. Did the women's basketball establishment just willingly destroy its own future to make a point? Buckle up, because the story of Caitlin Clark and the Olympic snub is about a lot more than sports. It's about resentment, power, and a soft quit that's echoing louder than any championship celebration. Before we dive into the deep end, if you're someone who loves stories about hidden agendas and real-world drama, you're in the right place. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because what we're uncovering here is just the tip of the iceberg. It was supposed to be a routine announcement, a list of names. For most people, it would come and go in a 24-hour news cycle. But the moment the leaks started to trickle out that one specific name was missing, the internet imploded. Caitlin Clark, the NCAA all-time scoring leader, the woman who transformed college basketball into must-see TV, the rookie who was single-handedly selling out WNBA arenas from day one, was left off the Team USA roster for the Paris Olympics. The confusion was instant. The rage was palpable. This wasn't just leaving a good player at home. This felt like leaving the sun out of the solar system and hoping no one would notice the darkness. The official explanation from the selection committee felt like it was written in a different dimension. They mumbled about experience. They cited a 3-year commitment to the core group. On paper, to the insiders, it might have sounded logical, but in the real world, it sounded like a weak excuse. Since when do you leave a generational talent, a cultural phenomenon, off the global stage because she's a rookie? You don't bench Michael Jordan in his prime. You don't tell a young Tiger Woods to wait his turn. You get that talent on the plane, and you figure the rest out later. But here, they didn't, and that's when the whispers started. Insiders began suggesting this was never about basketball criteria. This was a message. Sources hinted that there were concerns about how the veteran players, the legends who built the league, would react to Clark's meteor-like presence. Concerns about the circus she brings. In other words, they were allegedly worried about bruised egos in the locker room. They prioritized the comfort of the established stars over the injection of a superstar who represents the future. They manage feelings instead of seizing a historic opportunity. And that decision opened a Pandora's box that may never be closed. The aftermath was a masterclass in poor optics. As public pressure mounted, the committee's explanations seemed to shift and shrink, unable to withstand the glaring spotlight. They spoke of fit and chemistry, terms that are inherently subjective and impossible to disprove. This vagueness fueled the fire, allowing every fan, pundit, and casual observer to project their own interpretation onto the decision. It transformed the conversation from a simple roster debate into a referendum on the soul of the sport. Was this group protecting a sacred, hard-earned culture, or were they guarding a gate out of fear of the new? The lack of a clear basketball-centric rationale, pointing to specific defensive deficiencies or statistical shortcomings, left a vacuum. And in that vacuum, the narrative of deliberate exclusion grew from a whisper to a roar. The committee's silence in the face of this growing storm was interpreted not as confidence, but as confirmation that they had no defensible position. But to truly understand the temperature in that room, you have to rewind the tape. The hostility towards Caitlin Clark didn't start with the Olympic Committee. It began before she ever played a single minute of professional basketball. Warning shots were fired from the Mount Rushmore of the sport. Diana Taurasi, arguably the GOAT, famously said reality is coming for Clark once she reached the WNBA. It was framed as advice, but to many, it sounded like a threat from an old guard to a new queen. Then, legend Cheryl Swoops made headlines by incorrectly questioning Clark's college records and downplaying her impact. Why were these icons so intent on dimming the shine of a 22-year-old before she'd even stepped on their court? The theory, one that's gained terrifying traction, is a raw human emotion. Resentment. These women built the WNBA in an era of empty gyms, commercial flights, and minimal pay. They are rightfully proud of that grind. Then, here comes Caitlin Clark, a rookie with private jets, multi-million-dollar Nike deals, and a mainstream fame that dwarfs anyone in the league's history, and she hasn't even earned a professional paycheck yet. It's a psychologically complex situation. In most sports, veterans embrace the rookie who raises a financial tide for everyone. But here, the reaction felt different. It felt like Clark was being punished for her own popularity, as if her success was an insult to their struggle. This dynamic speaks to a deeper, more painful clash of narratives. For veterans, their identity is rooted in overcoming neglect. Their credibility is earned through suffering and perseverance that went unseen. Clark's narrative, in their eyes, risks rewriting that history, suggesting that all the league needed was a white, sharpshooting superstar to finally capture America's attention. This perceived erasure of their legacy is a wound that no amount of Clark's on-court respect can immediately heal. It creates a subconscious bias where her every stumble is met with a nod of, "I told you so," and her every triumph is viewed through a lens of undeserved privilege. This isn't just about basketball skill. It's about whose story gets to be the defining story of the league's explosion. The veterans feel theirs is being sidelined for a newer, more palatable to the masses version, and that fear can manifest as preemptive dismissal. That tension didn't stay in press conferences. It exploded onto the court. And if you watched even a few Fever games this season, you've seen it. Caitlin Clark gets treated differently. We're not talking about tough physical defense. We're talking about blatant non-basketball plays. The incident that broke the internet involved Chindy Carter of the Chicago Sky. With the ball nowhere near in play, Carter delivered a full shoulder check, knocking Clark to the floor, and then appeared to mouth a curse at her. It was a cheap shot, plain and simple, but the reaction to reaction was perhaps more telling. The league's initial silence was deafening. Many fellow players and even some media voices shrugged it off as welcome to the league. They said Clark needed to toughen up. But imagine the scenario if that was LeBron James or Steph Curry being blindsided by a reserve player. The league would have issued a suspension within hours to protect its billion-dollar asset. For Clark, it felt like open season. This created a direct through line to the Olympic decision. Why would Clark want to spend a month in a foreign country, sharing hotel rooms and buses with a group of veterans whose peers have either participated in or tacitly endorsed this kind of targeted physicality? The trust necessary for a team to win gold had been eroded before the team was even picked. This pattern of physical escalation served as a powerful, unspoken justification for the committee's decision. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy. The environment around Clark was so charged that citing chemistry concerns became a convenient shield. Furthermore, the league's disciplinary inconsistency sent a terrible message. By only upgrading the Carter foul to a flagrant after massive public outcry and handing out modest fines for other dangerous plays, they indirectly validated behavior. It communicated that the boundaries for Clark were different, that she existed in a space where the normal rules of star protection were suspended. This isn't just hazing. It's a workplace safety issue framed as a toughness test. For Clark, every drive to the basket now carries a risk assessment most stars don't have to make, a mental load that absolutely impacts performance, and crucially, her desire to enter an even more intense, closed environment with the very architects of that culture. Into this firestorm stepped the loudest voice in sports media, Stephen A. Smith. And he didn't just throw gasoline on the fire, he lit a flamethrower. Smith is known for hyperbole, but his critique of the Clark snub cut differently. It was surgical. He went on air and didn't just call the decision stupid. He exposed it as a catastrophic business failure. His argument was brutally simple. The Olympics is a global showcase for casual fans. The U.S. women's team wins gold every year almost by default. The competition isn't close. The goal in Paris shouldn't just have been to win. That was a given. But to grow the game to unprecedented heights. Caitlin Clark is the only player in the world who moves that needle. By leaving her at home, Smith argued, the committee proved they care more about their internal hierarchy than about the actual survival and growth of the league. He hinted at something darker than incompetence, malice, a deliberate choice to reject the very thing that could save them. And most explosively, he floated the idea that Clark herself was done with their games, that she had soft quit on a system that never wanted her. Smith's genius was in framing the debate in irreversible terms. He didn't argue about assists or turnovers. He talked about opportunity cost and generational wealth for the entire league. He painted the committee as stewards who, at the moment of their greatest potential windfall, chose to lock the vault and throw away the key. His commentary gave voice to the millions of new fans who felt insulted by the snub, validating their sense that something was deeply off. More importantly, he provided Clark with the ultimate shield, the business rationale. By aligning her absence with financial loss, he elevated her above the petty worthiness debate. She was no longer a rookie asking for a spot. She was an asset being foolishly squandered. This pivot was monumental. It took the power of definition away from the basketball insiders and handed it to accountants and TV executives, a realm where Clark's value is indisputable and the committee's decision looks objectively insane. And how could you blame her? When you look at the cold, hard numbers, the Clark effect isn't a theory. It's a quantifiable economic stimulus package. Games featuring the Indiana Fever have seen television ratings skyrocket by over 300% compared to non-Clark games. When she's on the road, teams move their games to giant NBA arenas to meet demand, and they sell them out. Her jersey is a top seller, not just in the WNBA, but across all women's sports globally. She is, quite literally, the economy of the league right now. Stephen A. Smith hammered this home. NBC paid billions to the Olympic broadcast rights. They need stars that draw viewers. By omitting Clark, the selection committee set a mountain of potential cash on fire. The revenge for the snub is passive, but brutal. Clark doesn't need to say a word. She can just stay home, rest, and prepare for the WNBA season's second half. And when the Olympic women's basketball ratings are released, and they're dwarfed by a random Tuesday night fever game in July, the point will be made in the only language that ultimately matters, dollars and cents. The financial folly extends beyond TV ratings. It's in merchandise, in arena concessions, in sponsorship activations that now have one less megastar to showcase. Corporate partners who jumped into the WNBA this year, specifically to align with the Clark-driven buzz, are left without their centerpiece on the grandest stage. This decision didn't just reject a player, it rejected a multiplier effect. Every company that invested in the league expecting a Clark-led Olympic boom now has to recalibrate. Furthermore, the lost opportunity for global brand building is incalculable. The Olympics could have introduced Clark, and by extension, the modern WNBA, to entire new continents, creating fans for life. Instead, the tournament will feature a familiar, albeit talented, U.S. team that the casual audience has already proven it will ignore. The committee didn't just choose veterans over a rookie. They chose a known, flat growth curve over potential vertical spike. In business terms, that's not conservative. It's a failure of vision. Now, we have to address the most volatile layer to this entire saga, the conversations about race and recognition. The WNBA is a league comprised predominantly of black athletes who have, for decades, been overlooked by mainstream media despite their incredible talent. The wall-to-wall coverage of a white superstar like Caitlin Clark has, understandably, sparked a painful and necessary conversation about equity. Players like Aya Wilson have spoken eloquently about this dynamic for years. This historical context is real and valid. However, in the specific case of Clark's Olympic omission, and her treatment on court, many fans and commentators argue this valid historical grievance is being weaponized unfairly. The narrative online has become dangerously binary. Supporting Clark is framed by some as dismissing black players. Criticizing Clark is seen by others as justified pushback against white privilege. It's created a no-win situation for Clark herself. If she speaks on it, she's vilified. If she stays silent, she suffers. This toxic undercurrent makes the Olympic environment seem even more like a pressure cooker. Stepping away from it, even if forced, might be the only way for her to simply breathe and play basketball. The tragedy here is that a nuanced, critical discussion about media bias and investment is being reduced to social media warfare, hurting all parties. Clark becomes a symbol of a system she didn't create, while black veterans who voice frustration risk being unfairly labeled as bullies. This oversimplification prevents real solutions. The conversation shouldn't be Clark versus a league, but how can Clark's unprecedented platform be used to lift the proven, under-marketed talent around her? The Olympic team, in theory, was a perfect venue to model that synergy. Instead, the selection feels like a rejection of that very possibility, a choice to see her stardom as a zero-sum game rather than a rising tide. This entrenches the divisions and ensures the painful, complex history of race and sports continues to be a wedge rather than a bridge to a more equitable and prosperous future for every player. This brings us to the most boss-level move of the entire summer, the rumored soft quit. After the roster was announced, reports surfaced that USA Basketball might offer Clark an alternate spot, a placeholder position where she'd train and travel, but only play if someone got injured. For a player of her stature, it was seen by many as an insult, a consolation prize meant to quiet the public outcry. But then, rumors began to swirl that Clark's camp had politely declined. That if she wasn't good enough for the 12-woman roster, she wasn't interested in being a glorified cheerleader. This is a power move Stephen A. Smith alluded to. It's the ultimate soft quit. No drama. No press conference. Just a quiet, firm reclamation of dignity and worth. She refused to validate their process by accepting their scraps. In doing so, she flipped the entire script. She's not the hopeful rookie begging for approval. She's the main character taking a strategic break, while the gatekeepers play their tournament in front of a smaller audience. It's a level of professional self-awareness that's rare in any athlete, let alone a 22-year-old rookie. This decision subtly communicates that her timeline and goals are now independent of their validation. She doesn't need an Olympic gold medal to cement her legacy or marketability. Her impact is already proven. By opting out, she also avoids the awkward, scrutinized position of being a peripheral figure in that camp, which would have been a constant source of drama. It allows her to control her narrative completely. She'll use the break to refine her game, rest her body, and return to fever with a singular focus. In the modern athlete empowerment era, this is a textbook move. It transfers all pressure back onto committee and the team that will play in Paris. Now, every loss, every sluggish win, every moment of poor ratings will be met with the unspoken question: would Caitlin have changed this? She has, without saying a word, made herself the ghost that will haunt that entire Olympic campaign. So where does this leave us? Has a permanent fracture occurred? The fallout is still settling. The WNBA now has a major image problem with a growing segment of new fans who see it as a hostile, cliquish environment that eats its brightest stars. The veterans, whether their feelings are justified or not, are facing a torrent of online hate they didn't have before. And Caitlin Clark? She's in the strangest position of all. She's both the most powerful and most targeted figure in her profession. The coming years will tell if this was a painful but temporary growing pain for the league, or the moment the old guard killed the golden goose out of spite. Can bridges be rebuilt? Or has Clark's career path just permanently diverged from the traditional Team USA trajectory, forcing her to build an empire entirely on her own terms? The path to reconciliation is narrow but possible. It would require public good faith gestures from veteran leaders, a clear commitment from the league to protect all players equally, and perhaps most importantly, a future selection committee willing to prioritize the growth of the game above all. For Clark, success is now the ultimate rebuttal. If she leads a fever to a championship, continues to shatter records, and maintains her status as the economic engine, the 2024 snub will be remembered as a bizarre footnote, not a defining event. But if the league fails to integrate her stardom and continues to permit a culture of resentment, this moment could be looked back on as a great fracture, the time when the sport had the world in its hands and chose to look inward, sacrificing its potential on the altar of tradition. The next move, incredibly, isn't Clark's to make. It's the league's, and millions are watching. If this deep dive into the real drama behind the headlines surprised you, let us know in the comments below. What side of history do you think the selection committee is on? And don't forget to subscribe for more unfiltered breakdowns of the stories everyone is talking about, but few truly understand.